Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show.
Somewhere in the city, rumbling sounds could be heard. Orion was still stacking up his Revenger ability by dying repeatedly from fighting against the Octopath monster, who was under GAAP's control. Luxa's and Orion's goal was to reach a certain threshold where the Jade Golem could one-shot kill any Octopath monster that they faced in the future. GAAP had mentioned to Lux that Octopaths were really strong abyssal monsters that could overpower even creatures that had ranks higher than theirs. Now that the old halfling was Lux's master, the half-elf told him why he kept on sending his Jade Golem to his death. GAAP couldn't suppress his surprise after finding out about Orion's peculiar ability. But once he knew about it, he finally understood why the Jade Golem was insistent on dying repeatedly at the tentacles of the Octopath monster. All of Lux's named creatures had a cooldown time of 5 minutes. However, the cooldown would automatically start the moment his named creatures were summoned. This was the reason why Lux could summon them again immediately after his named creatures died the first time. Their cooldown timers would have already finished by the time they met their end on the battlefield. While the Jade Golem and the Octopath were duking it out, the half-elf was busy trying to control Centimanes, which he had summoned to fight a rank 5 abyssal wolf that had appeared in Zangrila. Currently, the half-elf was having trouble making his new summon obey his will. Since the Centimanes was made by combining all of the skeleton gangbangers and the steel golems to form one entity, its power was able to reach the Daimos rank. This is like Pokem Asterisk N, Lux thought. Did I not get enough gym badges to control this thing? Is that the reason why it's not listening to me? The red-headed teenager didn't dare summon Centimanes when there wasn't a monster around. He was afraid that the Berserk 100-armed giant would attack him if it couldn't see another creature in its immediate vicinity. Also, there was one more thing that made the half-elf feel discomfort while he was fighting. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched by countless eyes. At first, he thought that this was only a figment of his imagination. But after spending 3 days in Zangrila, he had a feeling that there was more than what meets the eye behind the discomfort he was experiencing at the moment. GAP, who was watching the half-elf in the distance, was smoking, blowing white circles with his pipe. "You still have a long way to go, Lux," GAP muttered. "If you can't even control your own summon, then you will become the laughingstock of all true necromancers in the world." Just thinking about the bastards who were part of Memento Mori looking down on his disciple was enough to make GAP's teeth itch. "Still, there is one other thing that bothers me." GAP frowned. His senses as a necromancer are still lacking. Although he can feel them, he's still unable to understand what he is feeling. 10 minutes later, the half-elf forcefully unsummoned Centimanes after the rank 5 abyssal wolf was defeated. He didn't dare let the giant abomination linger even a second longer, fearing that it might start a rampage inside the already ruined capital city. "Rest for a bit," GAAP said as soon as Lux landed beside him. "We need to talk about something." Lux nodded and sat beside his master, who was still holding the pipe in his hands. "Master, I have a question." "You said that the passage of time here is different from the rest of Elysium," Lux stated. "Just what is the difference?" "You see, my friends are currently challenging a dungeon, and they might need my help. If possible, I want to know if the time difference between this place and the sacred dungeon is the same or not." "You don't have to worry about that," GAP replied. "Zangrila is a special zone that borders the Void and Elysium. Because of this, time is distorted in this place. A week here is only a day in Elysium. Spending a few weeks here is not a problem. Besides, if my guess is right, clearing that sacred dungeon is not an easy thing. It is much better if you master the necromantic arts before you return." Lux understood that what his master said was right. But he still couldn't feel at ease knowing that he wasn't able to talk to Kai and the others through the guild chat. GAP had already mentioned that Zangrila was a special place and that it had its own set of laws, making it impossible for him to contact anyone in the outside world. In order to change the topic and distract the red-headed teenager from thinking about his friends, the old halfling pointed at a wall that stood a few meters away from them. "Look at that wall, Lux," GAP ordered. "What do you see?" The half-elf glanced in the direction where his master was looking and frowned. He was about to say that it was only a wall, but for some reason, his senses were vaguely picking up that there was something else there. The half-elf narrowed his eyes and fixed them on a single spot. A moment later, the place he was looking at suddenly distorted. It was as if the air or space he was looking at trembled ever so slightly, making his eyes widen in surprise. "Focus," GAAP stated. "Don't look at it with only your eyes. You're a necromancer. Expand your senses to the fullest and see the other side of the world that cannot be seen by normal people." Lux closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. Once he had regained his calm, he opened his eyes and, this time, he extended his senses and finally saw what was causing the distortion. A little boy, whom he estimated to be at least 10 to 11 years old, was hugging a little girl, whom Lux assumed to be at least 4 to 5 years old. The little girl was crying silently as her body trembled while holding onto the older boy, who was holding her in a protective embrace. Just a glance was enough to tell Lux that the two shared a very close relationship, making him think that the two children were brother and sister. There is a saying among those that can see the spirits of the dead, that those who have been killed by abyssal creatures are unable to pass on to the next life, GAP said softly. "After visiting many places in the world, I am inclined to believe that this saying is right." Lux subconsciously swallowed his saliva after hearing his master's words. Suddenly a realization came to his mind, which made his body shudder. "Master, how long ago was this city destroyed by the abyssal creatures?" Lux asked. "A few centuries," GAAP replied. "Maybe 200 to 300 years. Master, are you saying that the two of them had been here for hundreds of years?" "Yes, but you're not entirely right. They are not the only ones that have been here in the city for hundreds of years." Just like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place, Lux finally understood where the countless gazes that were looking in his direction were coming from. Although he couldn't see them, the countless ghosts of Zangrila were all watching him as he battled against abyssal monsters in the very city where they were born. "I mentioned before that I was waiting for someone, right?" GAAP asked. "I was planning to give that person a gift, and that gift is none other than the souls that have been trapped in this ruined city for the past hundreds of years." All new chapters nvlbin.com. The old halfling gave Lux a mischievous smile before emptying his pipe. "Right now, there are millions of ghosts in this city," GAAP explained. "Just think of it. 1,000,000 ghosts and specters that you can add to your undead army, making you a powerhouse at such a young age. Isn't this the best gift a master can give to his disciple?" GAAP laughed heartily before looking at his disciple, who was frozen in place. However, instead of seeing happiness on Lux's face for the gift he had prepared for him, all GAAP saw was a pained expression that made the old halfling wonder if his disciple was suffering from a bad case of constipation. Originally, Lux thought that there wasn't a night and day cycle in Zangrila when he first arrived. But it didn't take long for this assumption of his to be corrected. During the day, everything in the surroundings was void of any other color except for the color of red. At night, everything became so dark that only the moonlight illuminated the surroundings. There were no stars in the sky, and the only thing that could be seen above was a white, full moon. After finding out that there were countless ghosts in the city, the half-elf decided to take a stroll to clear his mind. For some reason, the brother and sister ghosts followed behind him. They would always stay a dozen meters away from the half-elf as if following him was a fun thing to do. Lux let them do what they wanted as he was busy thinking about a lot of things. His friends who were in the gate of famine. His inability to control centimanes. The words of his master, GAP, and last but not the least, he was thinking about what a necromancer really was. Eiko, who could also feel her papa's worries, decided to keep her silence. She understood that now was not the right time to distract Lux from his thoughts, because he needed some time to ponder the things that he should prioritize. Now that he understood where the countless gazes were coming from, he no longer cared about them and simply accepted the fact that there were countless ghosts that he was unable to see with his current abilities. "I have been relying too much on my soul book to detect monsters around me," Lux thought as he continued to walk aimlessly in the city. Since the ghosts are not hostile to me, the mapping function of the compendium ignored their presence. The half-elf didn't have any particular destination in mind, and just walked and walked and walked, hoping to find solutions to the problems he was currently facing. He had already summoned his named creatures, as well as his undead legion, allowing them to have free reign in the city. Their mission was to engage any hostile abyssal creature that spawned within Zangrila while scavenging for useful things in the ruined city. The abyssal creatures had no need for gold, jewels, or other expensive things. Since the city was devoid of life, the half-elf didn't feel any guilt scavenging for treasures during his stay in Zangrila. Lux had no doubt in his mind that if Kai and Fei Fei had come here with him, the pair would have already secured the most expensive things in the city before he, or any of his subordinates, could. After a few hours of walking, Lux sat down and looked at the two ghosts who had also sat a distance away from him. The little girl was resting her head on her brother's shoulders, while the latter held her in place. Although Lux's face looked calm on the surface, deep inside, a storm was stirring. It took him a while to regain his composure before he closed his eyes to rest. He was really tired both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Because of this, it didn't take long for him to fall asleep, allowing the clutches of a dream to pull him into dreamland. Rise and shine, sleepyhead. A familiar voice called out to Lux, which made the teenager stir from his slumber. A moment later, the half-elf half-opened his eyes to see who was disturbing his sleep. However, after seeing a face that he hadn't seen since he had been born in Elysium, the drowsiness he was feeling melted away like an ice cube tossed into a hot desert. "And Max?" Lux asked. "Is that really you?" "The one and only, the god of gamblers, Max," replied. "Long time no see, Lux. Are you enjoying your new life to the fullest?" Lux propped himself up in a sitting position and looked around his surroundings. Get latest chapters on NVELBJ/N/C/M. He was currently in a space devoid of any colors. The only thing that stood out in this weird place was the god who had asked him to save a dying world from destruction. Max gave Lux an appraising gaze from head to foot before nodding his head in satisfaction. "Although there have been many twists and turns, I'm glad that you are doing your best to survive in this world," Max stated. "Before anything else, I would like to apologize to you for the mishap that happened back in heaven. If the canon hadn't encountered any problems, you might have been born into more favorable conditions. Although it is a bit late, please accept my apology." Max gave Lux a brief bow before raising his head once more. "In order to compensate you for your trouble, you can ask me for one thing. As long as it doesn't hit my bottom line, I will see to it that you get what you wanted. So, do you have anything you want right now?" Lux thought for a while before shaking his head. "Your Excellency, what happened in the past should remain in the past," Lux stated. "Perhaps the simp cannon malfunctioning back then was a blessing in disguise. If not for that, I wouldn't have been blessed to have a wonderful and loving family who truly cares for me." The red-headed teenager then bowed his head towards the gods of gamblers, whom Ariel said had risked his divinity to ensure that his soul wouldn't cease to exist. "Thank you for giving me an opportunity to live again," Lux said firmly. "Also, I haven't forgotten the mission that you have given me. I will continue to find ways to help save Solais from destruction." Max smiled after hearing Lux's heartfelt words. As a god, it was impossible for anyone to lie to him because he could see the truth behind every word. Seeing that the half-elf was truly happy with his life, the god of gamblers summoned a golden jar. "I am happy that you feel that way," Max replied. "But since I have already decided to give you something, I will see to it that it gets done. This jar in my hands is called the Jar of Fortune. If you place your hand inside it, you would gain something that will help you realize the thing you want most to happen. I am unable to stay long on this plane, so I urge you to hurry up and pick something from inside the jar. No matter what you get, I'm sure that it will lead to the thing that you want to happen the most." Lux, who could sense the urgency in Max's voice, decided that no harm would come to him if he did what his patron god asked of him. "Well, here goes nothing," Lux muttered as he put his hand inside the jar. He didn't know what he would be able to take from the Jar of Fortune. However, deep inside, he hoped that whatever he got would help him accomplish the task that he had envisioned, allowing him to take the path that he had decided to take, regardless of the consequences of his action. Eiko, who had taken a nap alongside her papa, was the first to wake up. The first thing she did was poke Lux's cheeks in an attempt to wake him up. It didn't take long before the half-elf opened his eyes. Was it all just a dream? Lux thought as he lightly patted the baby slime's head. It was at that moment that he saw the silver bracelet on his wrist with the emblem of a red phoenix at its center. This made him realize that what he experienced wasn't a dream and that he truly met the god of gamblers, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Follow EU's stories at n/velb/n.com. Eiko looked at his papa and wondered if he was still half asleep. Sorry, I'm just thinking about a few things, Eiko, Lux replied as he placed the baby slime on top of his head. He then looked at the two ghosts that were huddled in the corner and motioned for them to follow him. Lux turned around, not even bothering to look back to see if the brother and sister ghosts were following him. He needed to find his master and ask him something important, which would determine his next course of action. A few minutes later, he found GAAP playing chess with Asmodeus near the plaza of the city. The two seemed to be focused on their game, so Lux decided to let them finish before he talked to his master. In the distance, rumbling sounds could be heard as his named creatures fought against low-ranked abyssal creatures, which had spawned in Zangrila as part of their training. For Lux, this was a good thing because the more abyssal creatures he could get, the more powerful Asmodeus' Abyssal Legion would become. Nearly half an hour later, GAAP groaned after Asmodeus placed his queen chess piece beside the old man's king. Checkmate, Asmodeus said with a smile. I admit, you got me in the first half. Comeback is real. I shouldn't have made that move 5 rounds ago. GAAP grumbled. The old halfling then glanced in Lux's direction to see what he was doing. To his surprise, the half-elf was talking to the brother and sister ghost, asking them a few questions about Zangrila. However, the ghosts weren't replying to him. They simply stared and hugged each other as if they had long lost the ability to talk. The only feelings that remained after being earthbound for hundreds of years were their familial bonds, with the older brother protecting his sister even long before they had died. It's no use, Lux, GAAP said. Those two have very little sentience left. They're simply moving based on their instincts because their self had eroded after a few centuries of staying in this forsaken place. Master, are all ghosts like this? Lux asked. Do they lose their sentience after staying in this world for a very long time? Well, it really depends on how strong the willpower of that person is, GAAP replied. For example, children don't have very strong willpower because they haven't fully developed physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. If they were only dead for a year or two, they might still retain their intelligence. But as the years go by, their senses deteriorate until they revert to their most primal instincts. These two ghosts' strong feelings for each other are the only thing that has survived since the day this kingdom fell. However, there are always exceptions. Perhaps, out of the millions of ghosts in the city, you will find a few who still have their sentience intact. Those spirits are likely strong individuals who had high ranks when they were still alive. Lux nodded in understanding before asking his master the thing he wanted to ask when he came to look for him. Master, you said that you planned to give me the spirits in the city as a gift, right? Lux inquired. Right, GAAP answered. Since you are my disciple, I plan to give all of them to you. Aren't I generous? You're very generous, Master. Lux smiled. Since they are now mine, does that mean that I can do anything I want to do with them? Of course. No matter what happens, you won't get mad, right? GAAP laughed after hearing Lux's question. Why are you even asking this question? I already said that they're yours. Whatever you want to do with them, I will not lift a foot, a finger, or open my lips to get in your way. Use them as you see fit. Lux breathed a sigh of relief after hearing his master's confirmation. Thank you, Master. Lux bowed his head respectfully. I will go back to my training now. You do that. GAAP nodded before shifting his gaze to the Archlich, who had finished arranging the chess pieces on the board. Another round. This time, I will not show you any mercy. Ha ha. That's what losers always say, Asmodeus commented. Come. Who's afraid of who? Lux left the plaza and flew towards the outskirts of the city, away from the city wall. Heaven's bracelet will not be fully charged until tomorrow night, Lux thought. I will set aside my main goal for the time being and deal with the things that I can do right now. He then summoned his skeleton gangbangers, as well as steel golems, and fused them together to summon the 100-armed abomination, Centimanes. As soon as the giant made his appearance, Lux immediately unleashed a dragon's breath, targeting the monster's heads that numbered around 50. The half-elf felt that, no matter what he did, he wouldn't be able to make his latest summon listen to his order, so he decided to just fight it and forcefully make it submit to him. Seeing that her papa planned to fight against Centimanes, the baby slime became motivated and decided to unleash her own dragon breath that had the mana burn effect on the berserk abomination that had locked its countless eyes in their direction. GAAP glanced in the direction where Lux was fighting and shook his head helplessly. Your master really loves to do unconventional things, GAAP said before moving his knight chess piece. Well, I guess that is one way to make his subordinate listen to his orders. Asmodeus chuckled before moving his pawn forward. When master does things, he does them in a grand way. Even I can't count how many times I've been surprised by his actions, which defy everything a necromancer stands for. Tell me, GAAP, what kind of necromancer do you want my master to become? I want him to become a true necromancer, but he is not ruthless enough. I'm afraid that if I force him to do something really vile, like desecrating a graveyard, he will resist it with every fiber of his being. What a troublesome child. I can easily imagine that happening. The Archlich once again chuckled before moving his queen chess piece to the side of the board. Sometimes, the less obvious things make the most impact in the world, Asmodeus thought. Regardless of what Lux chooses, we will all support him with everything we got, even if that meant facing the entire world. The Archlich might not know what the half-elf intended to do with GAP's gift. However, there was one thing he did know, and that was, whatever Lux planned to do, it would certainly be different from the one the old Necromancer had in mind. Skeleton make. Lux shouted as he punched forward. United Nation. Smash. A giant skeleton fist materialized in front of him and smashed against the Centimanes, sending the giant abomination skidding backward. Smash! Eiko shouted as she imitated what her papa just did. Before the 100-armed giant could even recover from Lux's attack, Eiko's giant skeleton fist smashed against its body, making the giant fall on its back. All Might, who was watching the battle from a distance, gave Lux and Eiko 4 thumbs up. Good smash, All Might shouted, which made Lux and Eiko glance in his direction before they replied to him with a thumbs up. Okay, let's do an experiment, Lux said excitedly as he summoned his clones. The 2 clones understood what the red-headed teenager was thinking, so they immediately summoned their own skeleton gangbangers and steel golems. Summon Centimanes. Immediately, 2 more giant abominations appeared on the battlefield, making Lux draw in a cold breath. I knew it, Lux muttered. This new skill is completely broken. The 3 berserked abominations then began to fight against each other in a free-for-all, making the entire surroundings tremble as they rampaged to their heart's content. Eiko, who found this situation funny, also summoned her clones and had them summon their own skeleton gangbangers and steel golems. At first, Lux thought that Eiko and her clones wouldn't be able to do it, but he was proven wrong. Half a minute later, 600 armed giants were bashing each other with wanton abandonment, like pro wrestlers in a death match. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a Daimos-ranked abyssal black tiger appeared beside the 6 giants, issuing a defiant roar. For a brief moment, the 6 Centimanes stopped fighting and glanced at each other. Half a minute later, all 6 of them ganged up on the pitiful black tiger, who roared out of pain and frustration as 6 behemoths grabbed hold of its body, preventing it from escaping. A one-sided beating took place, which made Lux and Eiko feel sorry for the abyssal creature who had spawned at the worst possible place in Zangrila. Since Eiko is able to do it, I'm sure Asmodeus can do it as well, Lux thought. So that means I can summon 9 Centimanes at the same time. Although the 9 Daimos-ranked monsters were truly powerful, they still had their disadvantages. For one, they were simply too big, making them easy targets for long-range spells and attacks. Second, high rankers would be able to neutralize them because they were only on the Daimos rank. Bigger didn't necessarily mean better. The skeleton gangbangers were rank 4 monsters, making them very strong individually. They could decimate human armies in their wake, and their teamwork with the steel golems had been tried and tested over time. But that didn't change the fact that if used at the right time and situation, the Centimanes would be able to deal massive damage to anyone and anything within its striking range. For the time being, Lux labeled the 100-armed giants as anti-boss and anti-giant summons. Basically, anything above 5 meters was fair game to the Centimanes. It didn't take long for the black tiger to croak, leading the giant abominations to toss its corpse to the side. After the pitiful abyssal creature was dealt with, they once again grappled and fought each other, and Lux sneakily retrieved the abyssal corpse that was left behind. In the end, Lux and Eiko unsummoned the giant monsters because their battles were getting out of hand. The half-elf's goal was to make the monster submit to him, but he was unable to do it at this time. The next day, the half-elf tried again to make the 100-armed giant obey him, but he still didn't succeed. Fortunately, the span of time in Zangrila was very different from Elysium, so he had plenty of time to find the right method to subdue his latest summon. Finally, it's time. Lux looked at the full moon in the sky with a complicated look on his face. It was already night, and only the moonlight illuminated the ruined city, which was a stark contrast to its once glorious past. Lux hovered above the city plaza with his eyes closed, preparing himself for the grand undertaking he was planning to do. The moment he opened his eyes, the space around the plaza rippled, similar to that of a stone dropping in a still lake. A moment later, the ghosts in his surroundings materialized, looking at him with both fear and anticipation of what he was about to do. Come. Lux made a gesture to the brother and sister pair that had been following him for the past few days. The two reacted to his voice and slowly floated toward him, only stopping when they were a meter away from him. The little girl was holding onto her brother, burrowing her head into his chest. The older boy wrapped his arms around her body and looked at the half-elf with apprehension. "You did well protecting your sister for the past hundreds of years," Lux said softly as he patted the boy's head. "It's time for the two of you to finally rest." The silver bracelet on Lux's hand glowed faintly, giving the half-elf the power that he desired. The boy's blank gaze slowly regained its clarity. The same thing happened to his little sister, making both of them look at each other before bursting into tears. "It's fine," Lux stated as he hugged the two children who had suffered for hundreds of years. "It's time for the two of you to start your new journey. Don't worry. In your next life, both of you will still be brother and sister. I wish both of you the happiness you deserve." The two children, who had been crying earlier, turned into 2 white butterflies that circled the half-elf, fluttering their beautiful wings. "Thank you very much," the voice of the older boy said. "We can finally leave this place." "Big brother, thank you," the little girl's voice also reached Lux's ears. "I'm not scared anymore." The 2 butterflies then flew upwards, heading to the moon where a new life was waiting for them. Those who were killed by abyssal creatures found themselves unable to move through the cycle of reincarnation and were forced to spend their eternity wandering in Elysium. Lux had decided that he would be the one to free these wandering souls from the shackles that bound them, allowing them to start over again, just as how he had been given that same chance by the god of gamblers, who was currently watching his action from the heavens. "Looks like tonight is going to be a busy night for the caretaker of the cycle of reincarnation," Ariel commented as he looked at the 2 butterflies that were flying toward the moon. "I'm guessing that, hey, are you crying?" The god of games looked in surprise at the god of gamblers, whose tears were streaming down the sides of his face. "Ariel, I'm glad that I chose Lux," Max wiped the tears in his eyes. "It is the best decision I have made in my life. New chapters will be fully updated at novl/bin.com. It is your helper, Himia, that chose him and not you. Himia is my assistant. Her choice is my choice. While the two gods were arguing in the heavens, the souls of the dead, who had been trapped in Zangrila for hundreds of years, flew toward the half-elf as if they had found their salvation. Lux raised his hand, releasing a soft and gentle light toward the souls that had come to him for redemption. One by one, these souls turned into white butterflies that danced in the night, as if celebrating the moment they finally regained their freedom to pass into the afterlife. Thank you. Bless you. If we meet again in the future, I promise to return this favor. I will finally be reunited with my family. Mom, Dad, let's all go together. Yes, we'll all go together. Soon, the skies were filled with white butterflies that were all flying toward the moon, creating a picturesque scenery within one of the most dangerous places in the world. You foolish boy, Gaap sighed as he looked at the countless white butterflies that were now headed to the cycle of reincarnation. Now I understand why you asked me that question. What am I to do with you? Asmodeus stood beside the old halfling with his arms crossed over his chest. The glowing embers, serving as his eyes, glowed brightly as a feeling of warmth spread inside his already dead heart. Gaap, do you understand now? Asmodeus asked as a faint smile appeared on his bony face. This is the kind of necromancer my master wants to be. I hope you can respect his decision. The old halfling snorted, but he didn't say anything to contradict Asmodeus' words. Gaap's right hand gently held the ring that hung on his neck and rubbed its surface with his thumb. Although he didn't want to admit it, the scene in front of him made him remember the memories that he had locked up deep inside his heart. All the good people die early, Gaap muttered in a voice that even Asmodeus was barely able to hear. It is the bad ones that live long in this world. Of all the necromancers I could have found, why am I stuck with someone like your master? A single tear streamed down the side of Gaap's face as he recalled the distant past, a time when he was still happy. A time when his master taught him the joys of becoming a necromancer. A joy that had long disappeared in his life. Countless white butterflies circled around the city, illuminating the darkness that had taken hold of the area for hundreds of years. Lux hovered at the center of it all. The souls longing to regain their freedom all flew toward him, hoping to end their misery. Gaap and all of Lux's named creatures watched the scene in silence. None of them dared to disturb the sacred ceremony that the half-elf had decided to initiate by himself. Unfortunately, not everyone shared their sentiments. A crack appeared 100 meters away from the half-elf, revealing the figure of an Argonaut-ranked abyssal black dragon. Without giving anyone time to react, the black dragon unleashed an abyssal dragon breath at the half-elf, who was too focused on what he was doing to notice. No! Gaap shouted as he hurriedly summoned his own named creature. But he was simply too far away, and his summon couldn't move fast enough to save his disciple, who was attacked in his blind spot. Lux's other subordinates were also late to react, including Zagan, who was the fastest among the members of his covenant. Just as the abyssal dragon breath was only a dozen meters away from the half-elf's body, a blue comet appeared out of nowhere, clashing against the dragon's breath and making it completely disperse. When the light receded, a blue wraith, wearing a crown, stood between the Argonaut-ranked dragon and the half-elf. Filthy creature, how dare you? A cold voice filled with killing intent left the wraith's lips. It flew toward the black abyssal dragon and kicked the monster away, sending it crashing toward the city. From behind the blue wraith, blue comets surfaced and flew past him, attacking the black dragon with a vengeance. Wraiths, who were wearing knightly clothes, hacked, slashed, smashed, stabbed, and punched the abyssal creature, preventing it from taking flight. However, the black dragon was still an Argonaut-ranked creature, so it was able to resist the combined attacks of the 12 Wraith Knights that tried to contain it. The abyssal dragon let out a mighty roar, calling for reinforcements. Soon, dozens of abyssal wyverns descended from the sky in order to answer their master's call. The Wraith King, who had stayed behind to protect Lux from any danger, sneered as he raised his hand. "Rise, warriors of Zangrila," the Wraith King commanded. "Fight for our home and country. Fight for our freedom. Fight for our people. Send these foul beasts back to the abyss." As soon as the Wraith King gave his order, something stirred within the ruined city that had remained dormant for hundreds of years. From under the rubble, Wraith soldiers arose, holding spears, swords, and arrows. They were the soldiers of Zangrila that had fought until the bitter end back when the Abyssal King descended upon Elysium alongside his countless Abyssal Legion. After dying, their spirits had mostly been broken, unable to even manifest. However, after hearing their king's summons, these broken and pitiful souls rose up from their slumber and regained a bit of their sanity. It took them a moment to register what was happening around them. When they saw the Black Dragon and the Black Wyverns trying to stop their people from entering the cycle of reincarnation, the fire of anger and hatred burned in their hearts. Countless roars and war cries soon reverberated within the city as countless Wraith soldiers flew toward the sky and engaged the abyssal creatures in a fight to the death. Find new stories on NOV/EL.bin.com. Although they were only around rank 3 to rank 4 Wraith monsters, none of them backed away. They were like a swarm of killer bees, ready to defend their nest till the last man. Soon, an epic battle had taken place in the sky as the abyssal wyverns found themselves covered from head to foot by bloodthirsty wraiths, whose weapons stabbed into their bodies repeatedly. "Continue what you are doing," the Wraith King told Lux as he protected the half-elf's back. "I swear upon the honor of Zangrila that no harm will come to you." Hundreds. Thousands. Hundreds of thousands. More Wraith soldiers emerged from the city, fulfilling their oath to their king and their kingdom to protect everyone they held sacred in their lives. "Don't let anyone touch our master," as Momdius roared as he revived one of the abyssal wyverns that had just died to become his mount. "Morpheus, kill." The Death Tyrant gave an otherworldly chuckle as it unleashed death rays and petrification rays from its floating eyes. Zagan, who was also protecting his master, unleashed a barrage of black lightning bolts, targeting the closest wyverns, making them howl in pain. Diablo rode on his nightmare horse, which had gained the ability to fly in the sky, leaving flaming trails behind its back. As Lux's firstborn, he would not allow anyone to harm his master, and this determination made his blazing eyes burn even brighter. All Might, who was the strongest member of Lux's covenant, smashed one wyvern after the other, making them fall from the sky. Ishtar, Pazuzu, Orion, Lazarus, and Revan all played their part to ensure that none of the abyssal monsters could even come near their master. "Bastard! How dare you!" Gaap, who had almost lost his disciple, cursed out loud as he ordered the octopath to wrap itself around the abyssal black dragon, preventing it from going back to the sky. While the octopus monster was pinning the black dragon down, 2 of the 12 Wraith Knights stabbed the eyes of the abyssal dragon, blinding it completely. Roars of pain and anger spread in the surroundings as the dragon called for more reinforcements. This time, 4 Deimos-ranked griffins appeared and immediately took part in the battle. However, what awaited them was a black knight holding a black sword in his hand that reeked of death. Beside the Black Knight was a lady wearing a red dress, floating harmlessly in the air with a red rose in her hand. "Can you leave these little birds to me?" the lady in red asked. "It has been a while since Master summoned me, and I feel like playing for a bit." "As long as they don't go anywhere near Master's disciple, you can have as much fun as you like," the Black Knight replied. The lady in red giggled before brandishing the red rose toward the abyssal griffins. Immediately afterward, the 4 Deimos-ranked griffins found themselves caught in a petal storm that sliced through their bodies like razors. Black blood rained from the sky as the 4 abyssal creatures cried out in pain from having their entire bodies shredded by the beautiful red petals that showed no mercy. A maniacal laughter echoed within Zangrila as the lady in red slowly tortured the griffins until they breathed their last. "More! I want more," the lady in red shouted. "Give me more." As if waiting for that cue, hundreds of griffins appeared. However, these newcomers were only rank 5 monsters. They were the subordinates of the 4 Deimos-ranked griffins that the lady in red had killed. "Bunch of small fries. The lady in red laughed maniacally as she trapped the new batch of griffins in a storm of red petals, preventing them from going anywhere. Although Zangrila was already ruined, it was still located between the border of the Void and Elysium. Because of this, the abyssal creatures felt the powerful fluctuation of divine magic, which compelled the Argonaut-ranked dragon to investigate. Never did the abyssal monster expect that what was waiting for him on the other side of the void was an all-out battle of epic proportions. As if a dam had been broken, more abyssal creatures emerged from the abyss, ranging from rank 3 monsters up to the Argonaut rank. However, as if venting out their hatred that had lasted for hundreds of years, the Wraith soldiers didn't back down and engaged in a brutal war so intense that the ruined capital trembled. The sneer on GAP's face didn't fade as he summoned his undead creatures to fend off the Argonaut-ranked monsters that appeared. Although he was only of the Apostle rank, his named summons were strong enough to make even Empyrean-ranked monsters like Barca shudder in fear. The capital city of Zangrila had once again become a battleground after 100-year silence. The spark of this great battle, on the other hand, was busy purifying the souls of the dead, allowing them to enter the cycle of reincarnation. True to his word, the Wraith King didn't allow a single abyssal creature near the half-elf, ensuring his safety. An hour passed, and the battle was still in full swing. Fortunately, Lux's protectors were all undead, which meant that they didn't have to worry about exhaustion. When the last non-combat resident of Zangrila had turned into a butterfly, the half-elf was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. A moment later, Lux felt extremely lethargic, unable to even keep himself afloat. At that moment, Asmodeus flew to his master's side and caught him, preventing the half-elf from falling in the sky. The Archlich then immediately ordered his abyssal wyvern to fly towards GAP, who was the strongest person in Zangrila. Asmodeus knew that as long as Lux was by his side, no other harm would come to him. The Wraith King escorted the wyvern until it safely landed beside the old halfling. The King of Zangrila then gave the nearly unconscious half-elf a glance before flying to the sky in order to join his countrymen in battle. Half an hour later, the city was littered with the countless bodies of abyssal monsters. The Wraith soldiers who died in the battle had turned into white dust, coating the entire city like a blanket of snow. When the battle ended, Lux's subordinates began collecting the dead bodies of Deimos-ranked monsters and above, leaving the low-ranking ones to be revived by the Lichas and integrated into their abyssal legion. Lux, who did his best to stay awake for as long as he could, finally closed his eyes to rest. However, just before his vision blacked out, he heard a notification sound inside his head. The red-headed teenager no longer had the strength to read the rows of text that had appeared in front of him and finally succumbed to sleep's embrace. Eiko also yawned and closed her eyes to rest. She had also fought hard in order to protect her papa and was very tired as well. If Lux was only awake to see the information that had appeared in front of him, he would definitely doubt whether the notification was playing a prank on him or not. Congratulations! You have unlocked a sacred class. Sacred class unlocked, Heaven's Necromancer. Heaven's Necromancer. I seek the monsters you fear the most. Profession rating, Progenitor. When darkness knocks on heaven's doors, the chosen one shall rise in the darkened skies. Light and dark both intertwine, thus are the makings of the divine. As someone who lords over the undead, you don't care who you help, whether they be the living or the dead. Your actions allowed you to create a new path that is different from the norm, paving a way for a different kind of necromancer to be born. Sacred class bonuses. All of your summons will be immune to divine, light, and life magic even if they are undead. Spells imbued with divine, light, or life magic will now heal your subordinates, giving them a boost in strength. All of your attacks, including your beast companions, named creatures, covenant members, and summons, will be imbued with divine magic, allowing you and them to deal great damage to both the living and the dead. The divine magic will stack up with other elemental affinities that you have, adding another layer of damage to your attacks. For example, your Abyssal Touch, EX, will now change to Divine Abyssal Touch, EX. Your subordinates' affinities will also change. For example, Diablo's ethereal affinity will now become divine ethereal affinity, ignoring armor, as well as any kind of magical resistance. All of your named creatures and beast companions, with the exception of your covenant, will now have the same rank as you. Together, all of you will share the path that you have unlocked due to your strong will and resolve. You will now be able to summon an additional 200 skeleton gangbangers, total 320. You will now be able to summon an additional 200 skeleton arcane archers, total 320. You will now be able to summon an additional 100 elite spirit protectors, total 150. You will now be able to summon an additional 40 steel golem, total 60. You will now be able to summon an additional 50 liches, total 100. You will now be able to summon an additional 50 plaguewing gargoyles, total 80. Additional sacred class bonus. You can now summon a battle angel to fight for you. Follow EU's stories at n/velb/n.com. Summon Battle Angel will automatically be upgraded to Summon Battle Angel, SSR. All of your summons will obey you without fail, including any monster created through your skeleton generator skill, as well as any monster that you will obtain in the future. This is the privilege of the progenitor class that you unlocked. Transcendent Heaven's Necromancer skills. All of these skills will be unlocked once you have become a ranker and received the world's blessings. Transcendent Summon, locked. Transcendent Spells, locked. Transcendent Curses, locked. The rows of text in front of the sleeping half-elf slowly disappeared one by one. Even if they lingered, the half-elf wouldn't be able to see it because he was out like a light. Unknown to him, the countless warriors of Zangrila all bowed their heads respectfully in his direction, thanking him for allowing their people to find peace after being bound in a cycle of despair that lasted for centuries. When Lux opened his eyes, he found himself surrounded by darkness. It was pitch black, completely devoid of any color. Even as a half-elf who had the ability to see in the dark, Lux found himself unable to see anything. He couldn't see his hands. He couldn't see his body. He couldn't see whether there was anything in front of him. When he tried to shout, no sound came out of his lips. It was at that moment that the ear-numbing sound of silence started to make his ears start ringing. He covered his ears, but the ringing didn't stop. No matter how much he shouted with everything he had, his voice seemed to have ceased to exist. For the first time after being reborn, Lux felt truly and utterly helpless. It was as if he had fallen into a bottomless pit, doomed to stay there for eternity. Suddenly, he felt something touch the side of his face. His first reaction was to scream in fear and ask for help, but since he could not let out any sound, all he could do was shudder as if all his strength left his body. His breathing grew ragged, and he was starting to undergo a panic attack. However, just as Lux was about to fall completely into despair, he heard a soft and soothing voice enter his ears. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." A pair of delicate hands were wrapped around his body, pulling him close until he felt his face touching something soft and warm. He then felt a hand lightly pat his head, as if assuring him that there was nothing to be afraid of. "I don't know how you ended up here," the voice said softly, "but I'm here. You are not alone." The words of comfort and assurance made Lux regain his composure as he allowed himself to be embraced by someone who was slowly and surely starting to materialize in front of him. "Do you feel better now?" the voice asked. Within that dark place, a young lady with long, pink hair and green eyes smiled at him. She was wearing what seemed to be a ceremonial priestess dress, similar to what Kai wore, except her dress was more revealing, showing a lot of skin and highlighting her seductive and innocent charm. A moment later, Lux noticed the chains that bound her wrists and legs, allowing her to only move within a certain distance. "Can you tell me your name?" Although the young lady had noticed Lux's staring at her chains, she pretended not to notice and simply asked his name. "Lux," Lux answered. "My name is Lux." Lux paused after saying his name because he had finally regained the voice he thought he had already lost. "Lux, the pink-haired lady muttered. While I'm not completely sure, I believe that this name means light. Lux nodded his head to agree with the young lady's words. His name did mean light, and he wondered how that young lady knew it. How ironic, the young lady said sadly. In this dark place where I am imprisoned, the first person I've seen in several years is a person whose name means light. Are the gods perhaps playing a prank on me? Lux looked at the beautiful lady, who seemed to be around his age, as she muttered something while looking in the distance. I'm sorry, it has been a while since I had guests, so I forgot my manners, the pink-haired young lady smiled. My name is Aurora, and it means dawn. Do you know what dawn is? It's hard to know when dawn is coming because we are deep into the earth. According to my mother, dawn is the time before the first rays of the sun appear on the horizon. I don't know what a sun is, but I believe that it can be found on the surface world. According to the books I read, it is very bright and lights up the entire world. Perhaps my mother named me Aurora so that I would be able to see that light. Aurora paused before closing her eyes. Aurora also has a different meaning, Lux said as he looked at Aurora's sad smile. In my world, Aurora also means colorful lights that dance in the night sky. It is very beautiful to behold, and from what I can see, you are just as beautiful as those colorful dancing lights in the sky. The pink-haired girl raised her head to look at Lux in surprise. However, that surprise didn't last long, and a bitter smile appeared on her face. My name also means light? In a way, yes. Aurora then closed her eyes before lowering her head. I guess it's time for you to go, Lux, Aurora said in a tone that reeked of sadness. The half-elf didn't understand what the pink-haired beauty was talking about, but it didn't take long for him to notice that his body had started to glow faintly. I don't know if this is just a dream or if I am having one of those fantasies, but I'm glad that I met you, Lux, Aurora stated as she reached out to hold Lux's hand. But even if all of this disappears when I wake up, to have been able to talk to someone after many years is a blessing. Lux, I have a favor to ask. Can you think of me from time to time? That way at least, someone will know that I existed. This place is very lonely, you see. But I will keep our meeting in my memory. Lux's body was slowly becoming transparent as he felt a strong force pulling him toward another place. However, he fought it with every fiber of his being, wanting to stay a little longer and know more about the sad girl, bound by chains and all alone in the darkness. Where's this place? Lux asked as he resisted the strong pull that was tugging at his body. I will come find you. Aurora laughed bitterly as he looked at the desperate half-elf whose body had almost completely become transparent. You will come for me? Aurora asked. Even if you do, you can't free me from this place. The only thing I will bring you is misfortune. I don't care, Lux replied. I will make no promises, but just tell me where you are. If there is an opportunity, I will come to find you. Lux, please, don't make promises you can't keep. Don't give me false hope. Just answer my question. Please. Aurora slowly reached out to wrap her arms around the disappearing half-elf before whispering something in his ear. Agartha, Aurora whispered. Goodbye, Lux. I wish that you will live your life to the fullest. Just as she finished saying those words, the half-elf completely disappeared, leaving her all alone once again in a place surrounded by complete and utter darkness. Aurora. Get the latest sagepters on n/felbin.com. Aurora? Who's that? Your lover. Gap and Eiko looked at the half-elf, who was lying on the bed with his right hand raised upwards as if trying to reach out for something. Lux immediately propped himself up from the bed and looked at his surroundings. He was no longer in that dark and lonely place, but his heart felt heavy as if he had left it behind with the pink-haired lady, whose tears were streaming down the side of her face before he disappeared. Seeing that Lux seemed to be confused, Gap decided to give him a glass of water so that he could regain his calm. You've been sleeping for 3 days straight, Gap explained. How do you feel? My body feels as heavy as lead, Lux replied before drinking the cup of water given to him by his master. Gap then asked Lux a few more questions, and the half-elf answered them absent-mindedly. He could still feel Aurora's warmth in his body and wondered if everything that he saw was just a dream. There's only one way to find out, Lux thought as he stared at the empty cup of water in his hands. Agartha. The answer lies in Agartha. Lux still had many things to do, but he vowed in his heart that after he had tied up all the loose ends that needed to be taken care of, he would travel to the kingdom of Agartha, which was located thousands of meters under the ground, near the core of Elysium. If that sad and pitiful girl was really trapped somewhere in that dark place, he would free her from the chains that shackled her and let her see the dawn, which represented the meaning of her name. After eating his first meal after 3 days, Lux asked his master, GAP, about all the things that had happened right after he lost consciousness. The old halfling didn't mince his words and narrated the blow-by-blow account of what transpired, without omitting a single detail. The half-elf listened with a serious expression on his face because he truly wanted to know what happened afterwards. 20 minutes later, GAP finished his tale, and the half-elf lowered his head in order to digest everything that he had heard from his master. After a few minutes of silence, Lux thanked his master and slowly stood. He then left the house where he and GAP were currently staying to get some fresh air. The moment he stepped outside, he noticed that it was nighttime, with the full moon illuminating the ruined city as it did for hundreds of years. Lux also felt something very different, and that was the subtle fluctuations in his surroundings. He hadn't felt anything like this in the past, but for some reason, he instinctively understood what it meant. The half-elf then equipped his Favonius legacy and slowly floated upwards. The entire city was covered in what seemed to be white ash. These were the remains of the brave Wraith soldiers who had perished in the battle against the Abyssal Legion that had tried to attack Lux during his purification ceremony. Without their help, the people of Zangrila wouldn't have been able to pass on to the next life. The silver bracelet on Lux's wrist faintly glowed as if answering the half-elf's determination. Lux pressed his palms together and closed his eyes as if he was praying, making his entire body glow in silver light. Brave soldiers of Zangrila, selfless protectors of heart and home, lift your voices up in prayer. Sing it all across Elysium. May love and laughter light your days, and warm your heart and hearth. May good and faithful friends be yours, wherever you may roam. May peace and plenty bless your world, with joy that long endures. Now it's time for all of you to set off on a new journey, a place where happiness awaits. Blessed is your kingdom since days of yore. Its legacy will remain forevermore. Check new Uvel chapters at novelbin.com. From within the ash-covered city, something once again stirred. Countless small translucent white lights slowly rose towards the sky, like small fireflies in the night. These were the remnants of the shattered souls of the Wraith soldiers who had died protecting their home. They no longer possess any sentience, and what remained of their identity slowly flew towards the half-elf en masse. These souls could no longer pass through the cycle of reincarnation because their essence was too weak and would simply fade away long before they could reach their final destination. Lux then raised his right hand high up in the air, forming a giant ring of light that expanded for hundreds of meters above his head. He then pushed the ring of light upwards, making it hover high in the sky. The small white lights were all sucked up at the center of the ring of light and passed through it. Suddenly, all of these fragmented souls regained their radiance and transformed into white cocoons that hung in the sky, making GAP, who was watching Lux in the distance, gasp in shock. This is resurrection magic? GAP's eyes widened like saucers as he appraised what the half-elf was doing. No, not resurrection magic. But it's something similar. Just what in the world is happening? Suddenly, the old halfling's body subconsciously shuddered as he remembered a distant memory. Master, why are you doing this? A younger version of GAP asked. This is not the way of a necromancer. That's because I don't want to become an ordinary necromancer, GAP, a beautiful woman replied in a teasing tone. What I want to be is a necromancer that is able to move both heaven and earth. A one-of-a-kind, never-seen-before necromancer that does not only revive the dead, but also someone that can wield the power of the divine. Master, have you eaten? I think you're suffering from delusion. How harsh! My own disciple is telling me that I'm delusional. Just speaking facts, master. There's no way a necromancer can do what you're talking about. Hee hee hee. Maybe not now, but I believe that there will come a time when a necromancer who shares the same ideals as me will one day realize my dream. Heavens. Necromancer, GAAP muttered. Master, is this what you were talking about? As if waiting for that cue, the countless white cocoons that hung in the sky all cracked at the same time. A moment later, white butterflies emerged from them, and slowly but surely, they spread their wings. Suddenly, one of these butterflies took flight and flew around the half-elf, who was hovering not far from them. Safe journey, Lux said softly as the butterfly hovered in front of him for a few seconds before it finally flew towards the moon. The other butterflies also circled around the half-elf before flying upwards to join the others who had gone before them. Now that their souls were complete once more, they finally had the strength to enter the cycle of reincarnation and be reborn again. While Lux was bidding his farewell to the countless souls that had embarked on their new journey, a blue comet flew to his side. This comet then transformed into the Wraith King, who had earlier protected the half-elf and ordered the warriors of Zangrila to fight for the last time. I am forever in your debt, Lux von Kaiser. The Wraith King bowed his head respectfully towards the half-elf who had helped his people time and time again. When he was still alive, the Wraith King didn't bow to anyone. But right now, he was moved by Lux's deed, that he lowered his pride and bowed to the person to whom he owed a debt of gratitude. I know that you're still weak and tired from doing the ceremony a few days ago, but can I ask you a favor? The Wraith King asked. My other soldiers, I want them to also pass to the afterlife. In return, I will serve you until you breathe your last, pledging my loyalty and allegiance to your cause. Please raise your head, your majesty, Lux replied. I don't mind helping your soldiers to pass through the cycle of reincarnation, but they will have to wait for a few days. I am really at my limit and unable to accommodate your request at this point in time. Don't worry. They have already waited hundreds of years. A few more days would certainly be nothing for them. Thank you. No, it is I who should be thanking you, Lux. The Wraith King then pressed his right fist over his chest before kneeling like a knight in front of the red-headed teenager, whom he had decided to serve with his life until his oath was fulfilled. I am Leoric von Hiley, Leoric declared, the last king of Zangrila before it fell to the Abyssal Legion. My kingdom is no more, but as long as I remain, Zangrila's legacy will never fade. I hope that you can accept me as a member of your covenant. A notification sound then sounded inside Lux's mind at the same time as rows of texts appeared in front of him. Leoric had pledged his fealty to you. Will you accept him as a member of your covenant? Yes/no. Lux chose yes because he could tell that Leoric was serious about repaying his debt to him even if he said no. Immediately, rows of text appeared in front of him, showing the newest member of his covenant. Leoric the Wraith King. You've never known war unless you've warred with a Wraith King. Wraith King T/his chapter is up. Rating, SSR++. Rank, Dreadnought Ranked World Boss. Health, 480 million/480 million. Mana, 40 million/40 million. Strength, 200,000. Intelligence, 50,000. Vitality, 150,000. Agility, 100,000. Dexterity, 100,000. Unique skill, Wraith King Devil Form, EX. Active skill, Wraith Fire Blast, EX. Summon Wraith Soldiers, EX. Cursed Blade, EX. Hellfire Annihilation / EX. King's Gambit, EX. Summon Ethereal Spears, EX. Comet Rush, EX. Passive skill, Lifesteal, EX. Mana Steal, EX. Revival, EX. Critical Strike, EX. Wraith Absorption, EX. Spectral Form, EX. Abyss Touch, EX. Title, Last King of Zangrila. **T. Lux's eyes were glued on Leoric's information because the Wraith King stats had gone past the half-elf's expectation. He already had a feeling that the newest member of his covenant was quite strong, seeing that he managed to disperse the abyssal dragon's breath attack when the latter protected him. But he thought that he was only an Argonaut-ranked Wraith King. He didn't expect that Leoric's rank was actually a Dreadnought-ranked world boss. The health points of the newest member of his covenant was unreal, which made him understand why more powerful monsters could only be fought by people of the same rank as them. This also made him remember why Dreadnought-ranked monsters could easily demolish entire cities if no high rankers were present to defend them. If he were to fight the Wraith King with his current strength, he would just be like a 2-year-old trying to fight an adult with a toy hammer. But there was one more shocking revelation that the Wraith King shared with his new master that almost blew his mind. Leoric was actually a saint in his past life. The reason why his rank degraded so much was due to the fact that he used almost all of his strength to forcefully send his family members, as well as their retainers, to a place far away from Zangrila. He had done this when he deemed that his kingdom could no longer be saved. At the time, he decided that it would be best to send his family far away from the conflict, allowing them to live on and continue their bloodline, despite losing their kingdom. This massive undertaking drained him of his power, so when he died, his rank degenerated to such an extent. "Your Majesty, allow us to follow you as well." The 12 royal knights that served directly under King Leoric begged their king to allow them to fight by his side. "Thank you, but none of you need to do this," Leoric replied. "I alone am enough. All of you have suffered enough and should enter the cycle of reincarnation to start your new lives." "Your Majesty, we have sworn to protect you with our lives," one of the knights stated. "We will break our oath of fealty if we pass on, leaving you behind." "He's right, Your Majesty," another knight commented. "Since you decided to repay His Excellency Sir Lux, we will also follow you until the end." All the knights pleaded with Leoric to allow them to stay with him. While this was happening, Lux subtly used his appraisal ability to check how strong the knights were. Deimos-ranked Wraith Knights. Lux gasped internally after seeing how strong the Royal Wraith Knights were. Truth be told, he wasn't expecting anything in return when he tried to help the residents of Zangrila to cross over to the next life. GAP also thought that Lux's move was quite wasteful because he turned down the opportunity of commanding millions of ghosts to fight for him. Never did he think that the former king of Zangrila would pledge fealty to him, who was already a very strong world boss monster. In the end, Leoric reluctantly agreed to let his knights stay with him and repay Lux for everything he had done for their kingdom. 1 Dreadnought-ranked world boss and 12 Deimos-ranked Wraith Knights. This group was enough to conquer Wildguard's stronghold, where Lux had grown up since he was a child. Of course, he had no intention of doing so. But it clearly showed that he now had a fighting force that could make him a true overlord of a territory if he wished for it. Some of the Wraith soldiers that had survived the battle also asked Leoric to allow them to stay. However, the Wraith King firmly rejected their proposal. The other Wraiths were only rank 3 to rank 4 monsters, and, if they joined him, the chances of them dying for real were high. Although Lux could help them undergo rebirth, Leoric no longer wanted his countrymen to suffer, which was another reason why he decided to swear his loyalty to the red-headed teenager. 2 days later, Lux presided over the purification ceremony, allowing all of the remaining souls in Zangrila to break the shackles that bound them to the mortal world. Leoric and his 12 knights had stayed close to Lux during the entire ceremony, just in case an abyssal monster suddenly appeared to try and mess things up. Fortunately, no abyssal creatures appeared, allowing the ceremony to be conducted successfully. Lux rested for another 2 days, and on the 3rd day, he finally remembered the notification he received before he fell unconscious the first time. Heaven's Necromancer? Lux thought as he read the information inside his soul book. Is there such a thing? The half-elf even had a cheeky grin plastered on his face as he started to read the information about his new profession. But not long later, the grin on his face disappeared and was replaced with a gaping mouth out of shock and disbelief. The more he read about his new profession, the more he realized that he had actually pioneered a new path for all necromancers, which would soon show its might and take the world by storm. After reading all the information about his sacred class upgrade twice, Lux finally had a better understanding of his new profession. The first thing he did after checking his soul book was summon all of his skeleton gangbangers and steel golems. "Come forth, Centimanes," Lux ordered. Immediately, all of his skeleton gangbangers and steel golems merged together. However, something different happened. Instead of only 200 armed giants, who were 35 meters tall, appeared in front of the half-elf. Not only did the number of Centimanes increase, they had become taller as well. Also, unlike before, these giant abominations were no longer in a berserk state. Both of them knelt to show their respect to their master, waiting for his orders. Lux gave the two giants a brief nod before raising his right hand. A second later, a bone cocoon materialized in front of him. This was the cocoon where he had sealed the powerful monster that he had created through his skeleton generator skill. This monster was so strong that it was impossible for Lux to control it unless he had become a seer anchor. Fortunately, after unlocking his sacred class, any monsters he had created would obey his order without fail. Cracks appeared in the surface of the bone cocoon as the monster that had been sealed inside struggled to break free. Lux crossed his arms over his chest and waited for this savage monster to appear. Deep inside, he was very curious about what kind of monster it was because its presence was incredibly strong, even though it was in its sealed state. Suddenly, a mighty roar reverberated in the surroundings and the bone cocoon exploded, sending bone fragments flying in every direction. It was at that moment when the creature finally revealed itself to the world. A spindly black humanoid creature with 4 bat-like wings, a long spiked tail, 2 curved horns, and a blank face that was straight out of a horror story, flapped its wings menacingly before shifting its head towards Lux. Since it had no face, it didn't show any expression whatsoever. However, the malice that was oozing out of its body was the real deal. Lux then summoned his soul book to look at the information of his new subordinate, whose malicious presence caused Lux's named creatures to rally to his side, ready to smack the newcomer if it did anything stupid to their master. If the half-elf had summoned the sealed monster before he had unlocked his sacred class, the first one to die by the fiend's hand would have been none other than him. But, since he no longer had to worry about getting attacked by any creature he had created, the red-headed teenager took his time to read the information of the Argonaut-ranked alpha monster, who is now under his control. Before you access this creature's information, bestow it a name first, or it will break free from your control. Time remaining to give the creature a name: 5 minutes and 34 seconds. The half-elf glanced at the alien-looking creature in front of him and was tempted to call it Bat***N. However, since he had a feeling that copyright gods existed, he decided to think of another name for it. "Shax," Lux declared. "From now on, your name will be Shax." "Shax. I do not need 1,000 souls. I only need one, which is my master's." Nightgaunt. Dream Eater. Creature rating: SS+. Health: 42 million/42 million. Mana: 7 million/7 million. Strength: 35,000. Intelligence: 10,000. Vitality: 30,000. Agility: 50,000. Dexterity: 25,000. Unique skill: Dreamwalker, EX, Dream Eater, EX, Soundless Scream, EX, Dark Bullets Barrage, EX, Tickle, EX, Doppelganger, EX. Active skill: Tail Lash, Sky High Dive, Razor Wings, Night Slash, Hunter's Mark. Passive: Echolocation, EX, Baneful Presence, EX, Air Strider, EX. Title: No Face Hunter UW Uvels Up Tez on NOV/L/B.I.com. He is a stronger version of Zagan, Lux thought after reading Shax's information. With a high agility stat, the half-elf was certain that the Nightgaunt would be able to travel at great speeds, attacking his enemies before they could even see what hit them. Lux was surprised to see that Shax also had the Doppelganger, EX, skill, allowing him to create 2 clones that were just as deadly as him. The Nigaunt was at least 3 meters tall, casting an intimidating presence to those that could see its visage. Its faceless appearance also made it more horrifying because no one would ever be able to tell what it was thinking. Shax was the second highest ranking member of Lux's army, second only to Leoric, who was a dreadnought world boss monster. With this powerful new subordinate, Lux was feeling a little more confident when it came to facing stronger opponents in the future. I don't know how I ended up in this place, but I'm glad I did, Lux mused. He believed that if he had stayed inside the Gate of Famine, he would have never set foot in Zangrila, not met GAP, as well as became Leoric's benefactor. If only the Abyssal Duke, who was sealed in the Gate of the Apocalypse, could see Lux now, he would have definitely cursed the half-elf for having so many fortuitous encounters after his failed attempt to send the red-headed teenager to the void, where he would certainly meet his end. Lux, we need to talk. The half-elf turned to look behind him to see GAP sitting on top of an undead abyssal wyvern. Lux nodded his head in understanding and landed in the plaza with the old halfling so that they could talk properly. Tell me, what is your profession? GAP asked. A necromancer, Lux replied. GAP snorted. Just a necromancer? What you did isn't something that an ordinary necromancer can do. Tell me, have you upgraded your profession to something more powerful? Lux purposely didn't tell his master what his profession was because he was afraid that the latter wouldn't believe him. However, since GAP seemed to know that he was no longer an ordinary necromancer, the half-elf no longer hesitated and told his master the truth. Master, my profession had an upgrade and I became a heavens necromancer, Lux replied. Sounds cool, right? GAP's face immediately became solemn because Lux's words confirmed his suspicions. He had originally planned to make the half-elf walk the thorny and lonely path of a true necromancer. But now he changed his mind. Heaven's necromancer, GAP said softly. So it really exists. The old halfling once again remembered his master, who had also tried to take the path of righteousness. However, her circumstances didn't allow her to succeed. Instead of becoming one, she met her end, being hunted down by the champions of the Hellion Knight Templars, whose role was to eradicate anyone whom they judged to be a heretic that threatened the peace and stability of the world.
Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.